I'm Jacob Bertram, and this is my Praxis project in a synthesized format. So I'm basically taking the points I made in my research paper and summarizing them into like a 5-minute video. I'm going to be discussing aspects of French politics from 1789 to 1791. My leading question will be, how did the French political landscape change from 1789 to 1791? To answer this question, I'm going to be going through 4 different aspects of French politics during this period: the range of acceptable political discourse, the influence of young people on politics, the evolution of the values and type of government, and the representation of popular opinion in politics. First, I'll talk about the range of acceptable political discourse. In early 1789, opposing revolutionary factions accused one another of being counter-revolutionaries. Basically, stray from a certain ideological line, and you will be criticized for it. The Breton Club showed open disdain for nobility while France was still an absolute monarchy. This was mostly tolerated, showing that the range of acceptable political discourse had shifted drastically. Before, most criticism of nobility or the king would have been very frowned upon and could have gotten you into quite a bit of legal trouble. Anti-monarchist consensus was reached in the National Assembly in June 1789, and mere weeks later, this consensus was broken. And then in July 1789, the National Assembly de-radicalized and became moderates after the Paris masses committed 2 openly anti-monarchist acts, namely the murder of 2 royal officials and the storming of the Bastille prison. So, some conclusions that can be drawn from the range of acceptable political discourse. The first is that the range of acceptable political discourse can change very quickly, and the second is that political centrism, another term you'd use for would be being politically moderate, is perceived as being the safest option, especially in times of crisis, because you have this example of, the careening to the left, this anti-noble, anti-monarchist swing in the National Assembly, and then people kind of get their heads screwed back on straight and they go back to being moderates. Now I'll discuss the influence of young people on politics. So many influential political figures during the French Revolution were relatively young. In early 1789, young people in French cities wrote pamphlets calling for reforms to the French political system, and in January 1789, radical youth skirmished with nobles in the streets. Some conclusions that can be drawn from these 3 facts are that young people are ahead of the curve in politics, and especially in revolutions. I mean, you look at the fact that it's January 1789, and there's already young progressives clashing with nobles in the streets before the Estates General had even been called, right? And the second conclusion is that young people are often prone to political radicalization. Again, this is proved by the fact that that the leaders of the French Revolution tended to be pretty young, and that the trailblazers were also pretty young. Next, I'll talk about the evolution of the values and type of government. So in June 1789, representatives of the 3 estates committed to providing France with a constitution. In August 1789, feudalism was abolished. In that same month, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen was passed into law, guaranteeing fundamental rights and freedoms to the French people. And then, in 1791, 2 years later, the Constitution was enacted, taking sovereignty from the king and giving it to the people. The main conclusion that can be drawn from this set of facts is that the French government became much more democratic from between 1789 and 1791. I mean, you think of it in terms of, okay, the first month of 1791, King Louis XVI, absolute monarch, right? It is very ill-advised to question his authority, especially if you're not in his inner circle. And then, by the end of 1791, France has a constitution saying that, the people are the rightful leaders of France, right? Finally, I'll discuss the representation of popular opinion in politics. So the Jacobin Club was a very popular political club early in the Revolution and during the Revolution in general, growing exponentially in membership during the first years of the Revolution. For instance, in 1789, there were 19 French cities with Jacobin clubs in them. And then by July 1791, there were 921 French cities or municipalities. I think the term city is used pretty loosely here, just a community, right? There were 921. That's a massive increase. There were over 900 more Jacobin clubs by 1791. That's a massive increase, right? Okay, so politicians and common people engaged in discourse in the Jacobin Club, providing a direct line from the streets to the top levels of French government. So the conclusion that can be drawn from this case of the Jacobin Club is that political clubs facilitated the representation of popular opinion in politics. So the main conclusion that I came to through all this research was that French politics changed significantly from 1789 to 1791, becoming vastly more democratic and contemporary than they had been during the past centuries. Thanks for watching this. 6 minutes.